The hospital was unusually calm that night. Outside the enormous glass windows, the city lights shimmered against the dark sky, while inside, the emergency department continued its endless rhythm of monitors, footsteps, and quiet conversations. At the reception desk, Nurse Emily Carter finally allowed herself a few peaceful minutes. She was a blonde woman in her late 30s, wearing blue medical scrubs, a hospital ID badge, and a stethoscope around her neck. Sitting beside her was Rex, a large German shepherd wearing a black tactical harness. Rex wasn't an ordinary hospital dog. He was a trained military working dog who had been temporarily assigned to the hospital after his handler suffered an injury. During a training exercise, Emily had volunteered to care for him during the night because she had developed an unusual bond with him. She lifted a coffee mug to her lips and smiled when Rex rested his head against her knee. For the first time all evening, she felt relaxed. Then the automatic doors opened. A tall, muscular soldier stepped into the hospital wearing full camouflage gear and a tactical vest. His name was Captain Daniel Hayes, and the moment he entered, Rex immediately lifted his head. Daniel stopped walking. His eyes moved from Rex to Emily, and his expression changed completely. Several doctors and nurses in the corridor noticed the sudden tension. Daniel slowly approached the desk. "Where did you get him?" he asked. Emily lowered her coffee. "His name is Rex. He's been staying here." Daniel stared at the dog. "Rex belonged to my unit." Emily smiled cautiously. "I know. That's why I recognized his military records." Daniel stepped closer, but Rex suddenly stood and walked toward him. For a moment, everyone expected the dog to become excited. Instead, Rex stopped directly in front of Daniel and looked into his eyes. Daniel crouched and touched the dog's head. "You remember me, don't you, boy?" Rex gave a soft whine. Emily watched the reunion quietly, but then Daniel noticed something on Rex's harness. A small metal tag had been attached beneath the official identification plate. His expression became serious. "Who put that there?" Emily looked down. "I did." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Emily reached beneath the desk and pulled out a small envelope. "Because Rex brought it to me 3 nights ago." Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of a military convoy and a handwritten message. His face immediately went pale. The peaceful night had just ended. Daniel moved away from the reception desk and carefully examined the photograph. It showed a military convoy traveling through a remote mountain road. Several vehicles were visible, but one had been circled in black ink. On the back of the photograph were 6 words. "The truth never reached. Command." Daniel stared at the message for several seconds before looking at Emily. "Where did Rex find this?" Emily explained that 3 nights earlier, Rex had suddenly become restless while staying near the hospital's loading area. He had pulled away from his temporary leash and disappeared behind a storage building. When Emily found him, he was carrying the envelope in his mouth. She had initially assumed it was garbage, but when she saw the military photograph, she realized it might be important. Daniel's expression hardened. "Nobody else knows about this?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet." Daniel immediately contacted his unit, but before he could explain everything, Rex began growling toward the hospital entrance. Everyone turned. A man in a dark jacket had stopped outside the glass doors. He looked inside for several seconds before walking away. Daniel watched him carefully. "Did you see that man before?" he asked. Emily shook her head. Daniel instructed hospital security to review the cameras. Minutes later, they discovered the same man had visited the hospital twice during the previous week. He had never checked in as a patient. He had simply walked through the lobby and watched. Daniel realized the photograph might be connected to something much larger. The convoy in the picture had been attacked months earlier, and Daniel had been told that every classified item from that mission had been recovered. But the photograph suggested otherwise. Someone had hidden evidence. Emily asked quietly, "What happened to the soldiers in that convoy?" Daniel looked down. 3 survived. 2 were listed as missing. 1 was declared dead. Rex suddenly moved toward Daniel and placed his nose against the photograph. Daniel froze. The dog had recognized something. Emily looked closely at the image. Rex was staring at one particular vehicle. Daniel's eyes widened. "That's the vehicle my brother was traveling in." Emily realized the importance of the discovery. Daniel's brother had been one of the soldiers officially declared dead. Daniel had never accepted the explanation, but he had never found proof that his brother had survived. Now Rex was reacting to the exact vehicle. Daniel whispered, "If this picture is real, then my brother's story may not be over." At that moment, the hospital lights flickered. The doors locked automatically. Somewhere in the building, an alarm began ringing. Someone had entered the hospital after hours, and they were looking for the same evidence Rex had found. Security officers rushed through the hospital corridors as Daniel moved Emily and Rex away from the reception area. The doctors and nurses gathered together, confused and frightened by the sudden lockdown. Daniel remained calm, but his eyes constantly searched the hallway. Whoever had entered the hospital wasn't looking for money or medicine. They were searching for the photograph. Emily remembered something important. The envelope had originally contained a second piece of paper, but she had placed it somewhere safe because she didn't understand its meaning. She rushed to the reception desk and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a small folded map. Daniel unfolded it and immediately recognized the location. It was an abandoned military communications station several miles outside the city. "This is where the convoy was supposed to report after the attack," he said. "But the official records say nobody reached it." Rex began pulling toward the exit. Daniel looked at the dog. "You know something, don't you?" Rex barked once. Emily realized that Rex might have been trained at that station. Daniel contacted his commanding officer, but the response was strangely delayed. Someone inside the military chain of command was blocking his request for assistance. Daniel made a decision. He couldn't wait. With hospital security supporting him, he left the building with Emily and Rex. They drove to the abandoned station under cover of darkness. When they arrived, the building appeared empty. Inside, dust covered the floors, but Rex immediately moved toward a locked storage room. Daniel forced the door open. Behind several broken cabinets was a hidden communication terminal. The system contained old mission records, including a transmission that had never been delivered to command. Daniel played the recording. His brother's voice filled the room. "If anyone receives this, the convoy was betrayed. Someone gave our location to the attackers. We have survivors, but we cannot trust the people sent to retrieve us." Daniel stood completely still. Emily watched tears form in his eyes. His brother had been alive after the attack. The official report had been false. Then another sound came from outside. Vehicles were approaching. Daniel turned off the recording. "They're here." Rex moved between Emily and the door, growling. Several armed men entered the station. Daniel realized the truth was bigger than a hidden photograph. Someone had spent months protecting a secret, and now they knew. The secret had been discovered. But Daniel wasn't alone. Rex stood beside him. Emily refused to run, and the evidence was finally in their hands. The confrontation at the abandoned station lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Daniel managed to contact military authorities through the recovered communication terminal and transmit the hidden recording. Reinforcement units were dispatched immediately. The men who had entered the station attempted to destroy the evidence, but Rex reacted before anyone else. He ran toward a concealed compartment beneath the floor and began barking. Emily followed him and discovered a metal case hidden underneath the boards. Inside were mission photographs, communications records, and proof that several officials had covered up the convoy attack. Daniel opened the case with shaking hands. One photograph showed the surviving soldiers, including his brother, standing beside the communications station after the attack. His brother had survived. He had been alive when the false report was created. Daniel struggled to breathe as he looked at the photograph. "Why would they say he was dead?" Emily asked. Daniel slowly answered. "Because he knew who betrayed them." Military investigators arrived shortly afterward and arrested the men responsible for protecting the secret. The evidence was transferred to federal investigators, and a massive investigation began. But Daniel couldn't stop thinking about one question. If his brother had survived, where was he now? Weeks later, investigators finally found the answer. Daniel's brother had been living under a protected identity after being rescued from the attack. He had spent years believing Daniel was told he had died. When the brothers finally met again, neither of them spoke at first. They simply embraced. Rex stood beside them, watching quietly. Daniel later returned to the hospital with his brother and Rex. Emily was sitting at the same reception desk, drinking her coffee just as she had on the night everything began. Daniel smiled. "You know, I came here expecting to find a dog." Emily laughed. "And instead?" Daniel looked at Rex. "I found my brother." Rex walked toward Emily and rested his head against her knee. She gently scratched behind his ears. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story gathered nearby, amazed by everything that had happened. Daniel thanked Emily for believing that a simple envelope was worth investigating. Emily shook her head. "I didn't solve anything." "Rex did," Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but you were the person who listened when everyone else ignored him." Emily lifted her coffee mug. "Then I guess we make a good team." Rex gave a quiet bark as if agreeing. From that night forward, the hospital staff jokingly called Rex the most important detective in the building. But Daniel knew the truth. The dog hadn't simply carried a message. He had carried a forgotten story back into the light and helped reunite a family that had been separated by a lie. The end.